Well, hey folks, I'm here in Midtown Manhattan, and I wanted to take a moment to review the evidence that's stacked against Luigi Mangione in the brazen murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson here in New York City. In fact, just over my shoulder. Then let's explore why Mangione hung onto that firearm. Hey, thanks for joining Profiling Evil, and make sure you're hitting that like and subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. We're here in downtown New York City, and we're at the site where Brian Thompson was murdered. You know, the spiral notebook that was recovered from Mangione when he was arrested in that Pennsylvania McDonald's included writings that suggested that he was considering using a bomb instead of a gun here. But he, in the end, decided that he would shoot Thompson because it would be a more targeted attack and would avoid endangering, in his words, quote, innocent people. But I want to add that shooting him was a much more personal way of attacking, and I think fueled his need for power and control. Now, the suspect in this murder has not incriminated himself in statements made to police investigators, but his note, if proven to be his handwriting, can serve as a written confession to the crime. Now, other notes in the notebook express disdain for corporate America and the health system in general. According to the NYPD, this all aligns with the working theory about the suspect's motive for targeting Thompson, which is apparently animosity toward the healthcare industry as a whole. He calls out United Healthcare's annual income, and it appears that he's classifying it as the largest healthcare company in the United States, which I don't know, it might possibly be. Now, some media reports are stating that Mangione nor his mother were customers of United Healthcare. In other words, Brian Thompson was murdered because he represented something that the killer disdains: corporate healthcare decision makers. Now, we know through other reports that Mangione suffered a back injury back in 2023 that led to an emergency room visit and surgery to place screws into his spine. It's believed that those spinal x-ray images on his social media accounts are actually his surgery results. Now, acknowledging the back surgery, I think it's important to point out that Mangione appears to move very confidently. If he's truly the shooter in this video, he actually moves pretty comfortably and with precision. And those media reports suggest that there was no pain medication recovered from his personal effects when he was arrested, which I find really interesting. Now, as part of the booking process, Mangione's fingerprints were taken and then examined against those taken here at the murder scene. Also on the water bottle and the power bars that were recovered from the Starbucks just around the corner here. The detectives said that they have DNA and fingerprints, and fingerprints from Mangione were also matched to a cell phone that was recovered here near the site. In fact, he cut up an alley right here after committing the shooting. In my first videos, I mentioned that while this shooter appeared proficient with his firearm, he seemed a little disorganized to me. Now, you might recall I mentioned then that he wasn't wearing gloves, and he appears to lose control as the rounds failed to fire, causing him to cycle a number of those rounds onto the ground. Now, since 3 of those rounds had the words deny, defend, and depose written on them, we have to consider the possibility that this guy intended to extract those unspent rounds to be discovered in that way here along the sidewalk. Although the inscription would have been found regardless, even if those rounds were fired through the weapon. So I'm leaning more toward disorganization. And police said that a 3D printed gun and a suppressor, the same one found in Mangione's backpack at the time of his arrest, was consistent with the weapon that was used to shoot and kill Thompson. Again, just right over my shoulder here. They matched his gun, the one they recovered, to shell casings recovered at the scene of the crime. Now, these guns are sometimes called ghost guns. It's the kind of firearm that can be made at home with a 3D printer. They lack serial numbers, and that makes it really difficult to track them. But not all ghost guns are illegal, and not all firearms actually require serial numbers. So this thing is going to continue to be discussed in a lot of different circles. But the gun in Mangione's possession had a loaded Glock magazine with 6 9mm rounds, and it had this printed 3D silencer or suppressor, and that's all according to the criminal complaint in this case. Now, clothing, including a face mask, a fraudulent identification card similar to the ones used by the shooter, were found in Mangione's possession. And I think that's really important, because when coupled with the surveillance video and the images from the hotel, that hostel where he was staying, and city street CCTV, it appears that Mangione is a strong match. Or he's the unluckiest guy in the world when it comes to having the same identification that was used here also on his possession in Pennsylvania. And all that, of course, matched to the alleged killer, that imagery when he was checking into that hostel just up the street here. In total, the fake New Jersey driver's license everyone's showing online, and the other pieces of fraudulent ID that this guy had, along with a United States passport and more than $8,000 in cash on his person, are all really powerful circumstantial evidence. And another piece of really powerful circumstantial evidence is that piece of information that the media is reporting, that the suspect's mother reported him missing just days before the shooting. Social media posts from his friends and contacts also support the idea that Mangione had fallen off the social media map. So, with this information in hand, let's look more closely at that ghost gun that police recovered from Mangione when he was arrested in Pennsylvania. And as a reminder, it's being reported that the weapon matches ballistically the weapon used to kill Brian Thompson. So when considering the fact that the killer in this case disposed the backpack and the same clothing in Central Park during his getaway, we've got to think really seriously about why on earth this guy hung onto that murder weapon. If you'll remember, police officers were seen, police divers in Central Park Lake looking for that weapon. I wonder how many weapons they actually recovered in that lake. That would be really interesting to know. But the question is, why did he use a ghost gun, a privately manufactured firearm, instead of one of the thousands of firearms available for purchase across the United States, either legally or illegally, including here along the streets of New York City? Well, in my opinion, Mangione's choice to craft a ghost gun suggests a deep personal connection with the weapon itself. You see, the process of creating that firearm from scratch, especially one paired with a custom-made silencer or suppressor, is an intricate and intensive endeavor. The investment of time and effort alone likely transformed this weapon into more than just a tool. It became an artifact and a trophy that had personal meaning. Now, psychologists often refer to this phenomenon as object attachment, where individuals ascribe to emotional kind of symbolic value of inanimate objects. For Mangione, the weapon may have represented his mastery and control. As the artist behind its creation, he could have viewed it as a manifestation of his ability to bring a destructive vision to life. I'm sure that fantasizing about the murder during the weapon's creation could have further cemented this connection that he must have felt, turning the gun into a physical representation of his dark intentions. Now, the act of designing and assembling such a tool may have felt like preparing for an ultimate performance, much like all these performances that happened just over here on 42nd Street. The weapon, his artwork, and the act itself becomes his masterpiece. Well, criminal psychologists have long studied the phenomenon of offenders keeping items to connect them somehow with their crimes. These we call trophies, and these trophies serve as reminders for their actions and their accomplishments. If you can imagine a murder being an accomplishment, this overall sense of control. And Mangione's decision to retain the firearm, despite its potential implication of tying him to the crime, suggests that it was a trophy to me. And this is particularly significant because trophies provide emotional reinforcement for the offender and their self-narrative. Remember, they're dreaming up this whole fantasy. For Mangione, I believe the ghost gun likely became a totem of his perceived triumph, a physical token of his brutal achievement. And this aligns with theories that suggest that some individuals with violent tendencies derive satisfaction from revisiting their crimes. By keeping the weapon, Mangione could have relived the moment over and over again, either as a way to bask in this feeling of dominance or to reaffirm his personal manifesto that justifies the act, which makes me want to talk a little bit about that manifesto. Evidence suggests that Mangione may have operated under a personal manifesto, a set of grievances or beliefs that rationalize the murder in his mind. Now, such manifestos often combine grandiose self-perceptions with perceived slights or injustices, driving individuals to commit violent acts to correct their reality. The ghost gun, in this context, served as both a symbolic means of an end, a symbolic artifact embodying his ideologies. So, by keeping the gun, Mangione may have sought to preserve a tangible link to this crazy murder that occurred. And this aligns with research indicating that some offenders maintain artifacts to validate their worldview or to keep their actions from fading into obscurity. Now, in his mind, Mangione, the gun, likely served as an enduring reminder of the moment he made the statement against this perceived injustice represented by his victim. So, if we talk a little bit about the fantasies in this weapon creation, we have to consider that Mangione's psychological connection to the ghost gun likely deepened during its creation. It was almost a foreplay of activity for him. The deliberation, the methodical crafting process, and the assembling and ensuring its functionality may have intertwined with fantasies he was having about the murder. Psychologists will point to the role of anticipated fantasy in premeditated crimes, where offenders actually derive a sense of power or satisfaction from imagining the act. In Mangione's case, the act of crafting the ghost gun and that suppressor could have served as a rehearsal for this murder itself. Again, think about this. It's all about fantasy. Each step, from calibrating the weapon's mechanics to going out and testing its performance, may have been accompanied by a vivid mental imagery of this crime that he was committed. And now, thinking about it brings it back. This psychological rehearsal would have intensified his attachment to that weapon, further explaining his decision to keep it despite all the risks. You know, another theory would suggest that Mangione retained that ghost gun because of his desire to analyze its performance after the fact. The creation of a 3D printed firearm, while innovative, is often fraught with technical challenges. These weapons are prone to malfunctions such as jams or misfires, which could have been what we actually saw occurring during the murder. And Mangione may have kept the weapon with the intention of studying the failures and perfecting it for future use. Now, this theory aligns with the meticulous and calculated mindset that he may have had. Learning from mistakes is actually an integral part of this offender's approach, in my opinion. But by examining the weapon post-crime, Mangione could identify weaknesses and improve its functionality, ensuring greater reliability for future scenarios, if future scenarios were actually what was planned with this particular weapon. This technical focus underscores his potential commitment to crafting the perfect tool for his violent objectives. And you know, an even darker possibility is that Mangione maintained or retained the ghost gun because he intended to use it again. The weapon's untraceable nature and his personal investment in its creation may have made it the ideal choice for future violent acts. Retaining the gun allowed him to bypass the time and effort to create another weapon, giving him kind of a head start in the carrying out of additional targets or fulfilling other elements of his manifesto. So the combination of keeping the weapon as a trophy, or a tool for study, and a means for future crimes paints this chilling picture of an individual potentially preparing for an ongoing campaign of violence, revealed by this complex and dangerous psychology that underlined all of his actions. So as we kind of bring this full circle, trophies and mementos hold a special place in human behavior, and their significance can be seen both in legitimate and illegitimate contexts. In fact, I'm going to refer to, in my own life, items that I keep in my office. And I'm going to show you some pictures of my office, even though I'm sitting here in downtown New York. For instance, I have a Scotland Yard Bobby's helmet from my time working in London. A pair of chromed handcuffs symbolizing my role in organizing business leaders to assist police investigations. Or these hand-carved artifacts from my work across the African continent. These trophies all represent moments of accomplishment for me. They give me a reflection and a connection to meaningful chapters in my life. These are legitimate kinds of connections, but what we see in these offenders when they keep some of these trophies are illegitimate mementos. Mementos that serve as reminders of what we deem to be significant or important. They are touchstones for memories, teaching us about who we are, where we've been, and in Mangione's case, what we accomplished. So just as my trophies celebrate legitimate achievements, offenders often keep mementos to remind themselves of their personal victories, even when those victories are deplorable, disgusting, and damaging. So understanding this parallel helps us recognize the deeply ingrained human tendency to preserve symbols of things that we value, whether those values are honorable or twisted. So the contrast between Mangione's disposal of his clothing and backpack and his retention of that ghost gun speaks to the weapon's unique characteristics and significance. Items like clothing and backpacks are disposable, serving, in this case, maybe no emotional or symbolic purpose beyond their utility. In contrast, that ghost gun was deeply personal to this guy, representing both his identity as an artist and his perceived success as an ideologue. Additionally, the weapon's untraceable nature may have given Mangione a false sense of security. Ghost guns lack those serial numbers we talked about, and they're difficult to trace, which may have emboldened this guy to keep it without fear of detection. This practical aspect, combined with its emotional value, likely outweighed the risk of retaining it. The phenomenon of killers keeping trophies isn't unique to Mangione. Many notorious serial killers have kept items that served as symbolic reminders of their crime and kind of For instance, I mean, well, think about people like Jeffrey Dahmer, who was known for preserving skulls, body parts, and photographs of his victims. Dahmer's trophies symbolized his desire for power and control and his fear of rejection. These items allowed him to maintain an emotional connection to his victims and revisit his crimes in his fantasies over and over again. Ted Bundy. Bundy also retained photographs and clothing from his victims, using these items to relive his crimes and fuel his fantasies, reinforcing again that sense of power, dominion, and control. If you think about Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, this guy collected driver's licenses, jewelry, took Polaroid photographs of what he had, and he treated these items as trophies, keeping them even buried to be discovered years later, allowing him to savor the memory of his crimes and maintain his self-image as a meticulous kind of planner. For my friends down in Australia, Ivan Milat, the Australian backpacker, who kept the camping equipment belonging to his murder victims, which symbolized his confidence in outsmarting authorities. Ironically, these trophies played a role, like Mangione, in his eventual capture. And these examples illustrate the twisted logic behind trophy taking, where items become fantasized and they serve as a proof of power and a source of gratification. For Mangione, the ghost gun likely filled a similar role, cementing its place in his psychological framework as both a tool and a trophy. Luigi Mangione's retention of the ghost gun after the murder of Brian Thompson reveals the chilling intersection of psychology and violence. For him, the weapon was not just a means to an end, but a deeply symbolic artifact, a representation of his fantasies, his ideology, and his artistry. By crafting and keeping the gun, Mangione created a lasting memento to his crimes, one that reflected his dark mindset and his need for validation. Moreover, the possibility that he retained the weapon to study its flaws or to use it again in the future adds further complexity to his motivations. And understanding such behaviors provides crucial insight into the psychology of people like Mangione, and it underscores the unique risks posed by untraceable weapons like the ghost gun in the hands of individuals driven by twisted ideologies. So the question becomes, why would Luigi Mangione go to the trouble of building a ghost gun only to keep it after committing murder? Was it arrogance, or maybe a false sense of security in his methodologies? I'd really like to hear your theories, and I hope you'll put your comments in the comment section down below. And please weigh in on other people's discussions and their thoughts as we continue to learn together. And don't forget to follow Profiling Evil on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter for more updates and insights. And for those of you who enjoy audio podcasts, please subscribe to Profiling Evil's audio podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. Now, I'm watching all over here as I'm talking because I'm in the downtown streets of New York City. Make sure you visit our website at profilingevil.com to explore our informative story maps, the missing persons and unsolved murders map, and sign up for our digital newsletter, The Bolo. That stands for Be on the Lookout, and the only way that you're going to get that thing is by signing up online. So thanks for joining us from here in downtown New York City, Midtown New York City. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.